I want to start in a room. A leadership team sitting around a table, smart people, experienced people, people who genuinely care about the work. The plan is clear, the goals are set, and everyone in that room wants to win. But execution keeps falling short. Deadlines pass without updates. Decisions take longer than they should. And the same problems surface quarter after quarter. The team is working hard. The gap between what they're capable of and what they're actually producing just stays there. If you've been in that room, this episode is for you. Here's what I've witnessed across dozens of organizations. Growth creates a specific kind of problem, and it creates it in a predictable way. At 15 employees, the founder holds everything in their head. Expectations are clear because one person sets them. Decisions move fast because one person makes most of them. The whole operation runs on proximity. Everyone knows what matters because the person who decides what matters is in the room. At 50 employees, that model collapses. The founder cannot be in every room. Expectations that were once obvious are now interpreted differently by different leaders. Accountability starts to depend on which relationships are strong and which are strained. Meetings multiply because more decisions require more input. And follow-through gets inconsistent because tracking commitments informally stops working at this size. At 100 employees and beyond, the gaps multiply and widen. Departments develop their own cultures. Communication between teams degrades. The leadership team ends up spending more time coordinating internally than advancing the business externally. High performers start compensating, working harder, staying later, picking up what the system is dropping. The organization runs on heroics instead of structure. This is the pattern. It repeats in tech companies, professional service firms, manufacturing businesses, healthcare organizations. The industry changes. The pattern does not. When execution breaks down, most leaders reach for one of three responses. They hire better people, they add better tools, they restructure the org chart. I understand each of those instincts, as I'm sure you do, because they're reasonable responses to visible symptoms. The problem is that none of them touch the underlying cause. Talent increases capacity. It does not increase reliability. A high performer is placed into a system where decision ownership is unclear. They will make good individual decisions that still conflict with good decisions made by other capable people in other departments, because the structure for how those decisions connect was never defined. Tools increase the speed of activity. Operational structure determines whether that activity produces results. You can put a fantastic project management platform or a fancy CRM into an organization with unclear accountability, and what you get is a very well-documented version of the same problem you already had. Restructuring changes the reporting lines. The coordination layer beneath those lines stays the same. These moves treat symptoms. The underlying problem stays untouched. So, what is the underlying problem? The company scaled its talent without scaling its structure. There is a coordination layer beneath every organization. It's the set of shared standards that answer questions like, how do decisions get made here? Who owns what? What does good follow-through look like? How do we communicate when something goes off track? In a small organization, this layer is informal. It lives in the founder's behavior, in proximity, in shared experience, and it works because at 15 people, everyone can absorb it. As the organization grows, that informal coordination layer does not scale with it. The founder's behavior becomes impossible to replicate across 50 managers. Proximity disappears when teams are distributed. Shared experience thins as new people outnumber tenured ones. What fills the gap determines whether the organization holds or breaks. Here is what most leaders miss. Two organizations can implement the same operating system, and we've all seen these popular out-of-the-box systems. The same planning framework, the same goal-setting structure, the same meeting cadence, and get dramatically different results. The system is identical. The coordination layer beneath it is not. The organization with strong, shared, documented standards, clear decision ownership, defined behavioral expectations, structured accountability, they extract full value from whatever system it runs. The organization without those standards extracts the appearance of structure without the performance. Let's make this concrete with a real example. I worked with two organizations, same size, same industry, comparable talent on the leadership team and throughout the company. In the first organization, expectations were explicit rather than assumed. Leaders operated from the same written standards for how decisions were made, how meetings ran, including before, during, and after, along with how accountability was maintained. When a commitment was made in a meeting, the follow-through was tracked structurally and not left to individual memory. Feedback arrived early enough to course correct before problems compounded, and the leaders modeled the standards they expected from their teams. The organization did not depend on any one person having a great week. The structure held even when people were stretched, distracted, or new. In that second organization, expectations remained implied. Each leader operated by their own definition of good. Meetings consumed time and produced great discussion. And then the next meeting opened and started with the same discussion again. Accountability felt personal because the standard was never agreed upon. It just was whoever had the stronger relationship. And problems compounded quietly until they became crises. The leaders who cared the most worked the hardest, and they burned out while carrying what the system should have been managing. The difference between those two organizations was not the people. It was not the strategy. It was not the operating system. It was not fancy tools or a fancy organizational LLM, and it was definitely not budget. The difference was that one deliberately installed the structure that made coordination reliable as the organization grew. This has always been true, and two things have made it more urgent than ever. The first is the pace of growth. Companies scale headcount faster than in previous decades. Remote and hybrid work distributes team across geographies before the coordination layer has been defined, and the window between early growth and operational breakdown is shorter now than it has ever been. The second is artificial intelligence. AI gives everyone access to information, analysis, and even strategic recommendations that once used to require deep expertise and experience. Knowledge is no longer the edge. The organizations that win are the ones that can act on knowledge consistently. And consistent action, the right action, at scale, under pressure, across a distributed team, requires operational structure. Technology increases speed. Operational structure determines whether that speed produces results. Here's what I want you to do before you move on with your day. Think about the last time execution fell short in your organization. A missed deadline, a commitment that slipped, a decision that took too long. Now, trace it back to its structural root. Was it unclear who owned that decision? Or what type of decision it was? Independent, aligned, escalated? Was the standard for follow-through never defined? Was the plan dictated down by leadership without input from the people actually doing the work? Was the accountability living in a relationship rather than a system? The answer is almost always in that coordination layer. This is the work this show is built around. We are going to talk about what happens when the founder becomes the single point of failure in the company they built, and what it takes to change that. Hit that subscribe or follow button. Press that little bell so you're notified when we release new episodes. And I will see you in episode 2.
Finally one together.